All righty, we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Office of Career Development's Fundamental Series, Cover Letters 101. We're going to jump right off. I'm going to introduce our other members of the Office of Career Development. I'm Jody Haley. I am the Assistant Dean here in the Office of Career Development. We have our Associate Director, Christopher Gerlicka, and our Assistant Director, Nina Abinante. And I will start off. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to jump right into the very core of why you would want to write a cover letter. To hit on those first two bullet points right there, your cover letter and the purpose behind writing a cover letter is that it will complement the resume that you have with your application by making it easy for the employer to see how the experience you have and your interest connects to the position at hand, right? Obviously, the goal behind your application and the utilization of a cover letter is to secure an interview, and you want the employer to see those things. The cover letter also allows your personality to show through in a way that the resume necessarily might not be able to. You're allowing an employer to understand a little bit about who you are as a person and why you might want this position in a way that the resume, sort of stating your experience just doesn't allow to come through. Um, you know, Convincing an employer through this letter of your skills and your experiences and helping them understand why you might be a good fit for this position or for the organization or the employer, and just helping them understand your desire to have this job and why you make sense for it. The cover letter also just allows you to express to an employer or an organization or a person why you are excited about this, right? You want to, through this letter, be able to express some sort of enthusiasm. You don't just want it to sort of drone on and list your experiences, right? You want to be able to come through, and that's sort of like your personality with your enthusiasm and why you'd be good fit for this position. So it's sort of this holistic letter with a lot of different little points to it. But it's really important. The cover letter, you you want to be able to convey to an employer why you're relevant for this position. You're all very awesome, and there's probably a lot of really qualified people for a position, but why are you relevant to this position? And that is what an employer wants to know. Okay. The important part about a cover letter, one of the most important parts, is that's the first time that an employer is seeing your writing also. It has to be really, really well written, okay? There can be any errors in it. You want it to be persuasive. It has to be an opportunity for an employer to finally, like, to see, in addition to your resume or any other application materials, how you are as a writer. And regardless of what position you are applying to, your writing is going to be one of the first things that they take note of, okay? So really, really important. We'll move on to a little bit about the prep work that comes along with a cover letter. You want to take inventory before you even begin writing your cover letter. Like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your relevant skills, right? And you want to focus on those strengths, okay? You want to be able to, have some persuasive reasons why that employer should hire you, and you want to be thoughtful about it. So before you even begin writing, write a list, right? What are you good at? What are the things that you feel like would be relevant to this job? Any skills you developed prior to law school? Were you working in finance and now you're applying for a compliance position at a bank? Those are some relevant skills that you could bring in from your previous work. Did you volunteer at a nonprofit and you have some relevant skills that would be really great for a legal services position? These are all things that you should think about when you're taking inventory of those things. Any relevant law school courses, related internships, things that you may have done in undergraduate, or if you worked prior to coming to law school, anything that's in law school. Like, are you, taking a course that's relevant to this position and you really want to mention that? That might be great. Geographic ties to an area. If you are not from this area, or you're from, or even if you are from this area, right? What are your geographic ties? Are you applying to a position that's in Arizona and you worked there for 3 years, or you went to undergraduate there? If you have a geographic tie to something, it's really important for an employer to know that, particularly in smaller legal communities, for example, like even here in Rhode Island. They love to hear either that you're from Rhode Island or you're from the area, or why you want to stay here. If you're not from here, but you've been in law school here for a couple of years and you're like, I love this area, I want to stay here. You had experiences here, you've interned here, you know people, you've gotten your network. Those are really important things to mention for those types of, for an employer to hear, right? You can also, within the scope of the cover letter, talk about how you heard about the position. If you were referred by a colleague, an internship supervisor, or something like that, or if there was a professor who referred you to the position. The anticipation is that you've networked, right? And you've done some sort of networking, either in school, outside of school, with others. And so if there is a position that came about through that networking, it's appropriate to mention it. And it's important to mention it too if you hear about the position from someone that you've networked with. The job posting itself provides for you a lot of material, right? It's a guide. The job posting itself is a complete guide about the relevant skills that you might need for the position, okay? It can help you when you're reading through the job posting to be like, oh, I do know how to do this, or this is a skill that I have. You want to make those connections between what is listed in the job posting and the responsibilities of the job posting and what you know how to do. Take inventory of that, take note of that. If you don't think that you have any, come in and talk to us. Myself, Nina, Chris, we will help you make that connection. It is not easy to do initially, but I think once you do it a few times, it becomes second nature and you will understand the skills that you have and how that relates directly to a job posting. We can help you figure it out. I will take one quick note on AI before I move on. I want to be totally transparent and just realistic about the use of AI. Obviously, there is an honor code about usage about AI and things like that, but we know that students will utilize it, and it's appropriate in certain instances. Absolutely. We want to encourage you to try to avoid using only AI. Okay. We are confident that you have the skill set to be able to write a really fantastic cover letter without utilizing it. However, to be realistic, and if you do use it, and if you must use it, please, please be aware that you have to edit what the outcome of the AI input is, right? You cannot just put in prompts to AI and have it spit out a perfect letter. That is not going to happen, okay? You have to edit the letter to conform to the employer expectations, to our expectations. We are well aware of when someone uses AI. It is so obvious, at least now, right? At this point, it's not a perfect system. There will be grammatical errors. There will be errors just in general that make no sense. You must utilize AI responsibly. And if you do not, then you're not going to reap the benefits. So you need to make sure that you're using it responsibly and appropriately and editing even after utilizing it, okay? And just as a note, I know that some AI services will keep and utilize your information for other users. So you just want to be really careful about what you're putting out there, just as a note of warning, I guess. And I'll move on to my colleague who's going to take the next portion of this.
Hello. Yeah, so now that Jody's talked to you about like the global reasons why cover letters are utilized by employers and the prep work that you need to do in order to write them, Nina and I are going to talk about a lot of the nitty-gritty sort of as you're writing the real advice about the letter itself. So first is a paragraph that sometimes we call a why them paragraph, but it's essentially why are you applying to this employer? Um, every cover letter needs to be unique and specific to that employer. Oftentimes, probably before you got to law school, you're accustomed to writing sort of one cover letter that just kind of talks about you for a while. And oftentimes that is sort of the barrier for a lot of students for wanting to write a cover letter because you don't want to talk about yourselves. And so the why them is kind of nice because you get to talk about the employer. And you don't have to focus as much on you outside of focusing on the connection that you have with that employer. And so employers they want evidence that you have a sincere and genuine interest in that employer. And that can come through in a couple different ways. So one way is just making sure that it's targeted to them and talking about like either it's because of the practice areas, the work that they do, and that can be a whole lot of different things. Employers will have mission or value pages on their websites that can really give you a lot of good information about like how they view a client or how they want to do their work or the atmosphere that they have. And those are important things to mention that connect with you. Um, and oftentimes too, if they have a summer internship program and their summer internship program is on their website, and maybe they talk about what they are doing. A lot of like, especially for the larger law firms that have summer associate programs, they talk about the mentorship or which practice areas you might be kind of seeing, or if you're cycling through. Some even have rafting trips that you can talk about. Like that's a cool thing that you're interested in doing. This is just a way to show that you did that prep work that Jody talked about, that you did look at this employer and you've really had a good thought about why you want to be there. No employer, public, private, or in between, wants a student or a graduate who just kind of like wants a job. Because that person's not going to be the best kind of intern or employee, and they just don't want that. And so it's very good to not to have a generic one. And we do know that many, many employers will kind of just toss the generic cover letters that could be sent to anyone because they feel like you did not value their time by giving the work and putting that into it. Additionally, you can talk about sort of geographic area. I know Jody mentioned that a bit, but that can also be the relevancy there, especially if maybe you are a non-Rhode Islander attending school here and you want to go back home. You should express that and let the employer know that, hey, you want to start your legal career wherever you're from. Conversely, if you're a Rhode Islander or you want to stay, saying that same thing, that you want to start your career here, is always really nice. And I do want to make a specific note about public interest cover letters. And so public interest cover letters can be a lot more personal, almost veering into personal statement zone, but not like that much information. And because those employers really want to know why this work is important to you. They want to see that that is the thing that you maybe went to law school for, or you have a deep personal relationship with that type of law that makes sense to you, and why you want to be helping people. Particularly public interest internships currently tend to be unpaid. And so they're looking for people who are like really like passionate, right? And they want those type of folks who are more willing to kind of be with them for these reasons. Where sometimes if you're applying to a number of firms, the why them can be a bit of a struggle to write because firms sometimes don't give you a whole lot to work with. And so it will be just kind of talking about practice areas and can sometimes be a little dry, but either myself, Jody, or Nina are happy to work out and make sure that those why them paragraphs sound genuine and strong, so that the employer knows that you really are excited to work for them and that you want to be with them. So another big thing to note too, when you're talking about the reasons why, emphasize what you have to offer or why on a more philosophical level, or just practical, workplace, the geographic location that you want to be there. Do not emphasize or really bring up how you're going to use them to gain new skills. Every employer knows that you will be gaining new skills as an intern, and they know exactly your skill levels. If you are a 1L or a 2L or a graduate, they know what they're kind of getting by advertising and looking for students of those class years. They know it. That you don't need to tell them. Don't tell them the quiet part out loud. That you are going to be using them and probably not staying with them for very long. Employers just don't really like to see that. It does not make them feel very special. And so you are trying to, kind of date your employer in a way. So don't do that. That's not nice. Um, so moving on from the why them. So starting off talking about them, why you want to be there. Then we're going to talk about sort of why they should consider hiring you. So you've already made that like connection with the employer, explained why you like them so much, and now you get to sort of show off what's important about you. And that's where that prep work that Jody talked about really comes in handy because now you can kind of have your, box of skill sets, right? And like think about what ones make sense for this employer. And that's going to be based on the job description, or if there's not a great job description, which frankly, some employers don't have great job descriptions, no matter how much we kind of want them to. And that's maybe a conversation with one of us career counselors. If we either know the employer or that type of employer, we can help you navigate which ones to highlight, and whether they are your academic achievements, practical skills, other experiences, and how we kind of tie them and show the relevant ones. You should only be focusing on like 2 or 3 that are important to that employer themselves, because this should be just one paragraph. It should not be super duper long. Employers, they don't want to be reading a novel about you. They also have your resume and they want this one cover letter. And don't list them. I think one of the things that a lot of people do initially is look at your resume, then you list like, hey, I worked here and I did this thing. Next sentence. And then I was here and I did this thing. And that's frankly boring. Employers don't want to read that. So they really want to sort of see a story. And there's ways for you to connect a lot of dots for your from your resume to your cover letter. So one of the things that your cover letter is doing is also explaining you. And so if you have a lot of different experiences, it's a good way for you to kind of condense them all and connect those dots. So if you have a lot of experience working with clients or with the public in general, so say you have like serving experience, but you've also worked in social work or something like that, you can really develop a strong statement about how you can talk with anybody. And you have clear communication skills and good client communications potentially, and those things that are important to maybe that firm or that legal organization you're applying to. And so there's these things where we can kind of tie that all together. So basically, instead of saying, here I did this, here I did this, here I did this, you go, I have X skill because I was at, Y and Z. And that's sort of showing the connections and how long you've developed skills in all of these things in your cover letter. Sometimes this, and I do want to note, sometimes this is more difficult if you're a 1L because you just don't have as much experience. And that's where, Jody, Nina, and I come in to help massage some of those things. And you will get that experience as you gain more internships, do more pro bono and all of that, you'll gain more things for us to kind of connect and talk about. And so, yeah, and you want to make sure that you are highlighting the ones that the employer actually cares about. And not talking about skills or experiences that are not relevant to that employer because they do not care, frankly. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that. And this also goes into the individualization of your cover letters. Each one and each of your YUs are going to be a little different and they might be tweaked depending on who you're sending that to. And I know we have a couple other things down there, like do not assume they are going to connect the dots for you. And that's kind of throughout all of your application materials, dumbing it down for the employers. They don't have the time or the want to kind of search through your stuff that you think that they should just get out of this. And so making sure that it is clear as day, that you have all these skills and all of this stuff is just right there in front of their face. And that is going to land you more interviews than not. So next, Nina is going to talk about sort of the other 2 pieces of the cover letter.
Hi guys. So starting out, we're going to talk about the opening and closing of your cover letter. So this is essentially the introduction paragraph and the conclusion paragraph. So With your introduction paragraph, this is, you know, a very short paragraph. It's very basic. It gives very basic information and kind of sets the tone for the rest of your cover letter. So you want to explain, you know, that you are a 1L or a 2L student and you're applying to a specific position. And not much more than that. You do want to, you know, clarify if you want to work remotely or in what office, if there's a job posting that has multiple different locations listed. But one thing we really don't want you to include in this paragraph is your name. A lot of students will say, you know, my name is Nina and I am applying for your summer associate position. You don't need to put that because as you'll see in a little bit when we go over the sample cover letter, your heading is going to be at the top of your page. So they're already going to know that as soon as they look at your cover letter. They're going to know your name. They're going to know all your contact information. So it's important to just keep this first paragraph short, sweet, and to the point. It doesn't need to have a huge explanation in it. It's really only a couple of sentences typically. This is also the place in that first paragraph to name drop someone that has recommended you to the position or that you know in the company or the firm. I know Jody had talked a little bit earlier about networking, and if there's someone that you have networked with that has led you to apply to this position, this is the proper place to put that within your cover letter. So similar to your introduction paragraph, your conclusion paragraph is going to be fairly short, sweet, and to the point. You don't want to, it just doesn't need to be a really big paragraph. It's fairly brief. You should say, you know, thank you so much, something along those lines, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. I look forward to hearing from you. But again, you do not need to put your contact information in this final paragraph. I know sometimes it feels comfortable to put those things in there, but again, your header is going to be at the top of this page. So your phone number, your email address, like all those important things that an employer would need to contact you are going to be right there for them. So you don't need to be redundant in that way. We put here, be polite but concise with your introduction and conclusion. Again, these are short paragraphs. They're pretty basic. These are things that will be, the general format of them will be used in every cover letter you send out. But as I'll say in a minute, it's important to be mindful of that. So, additional things to consider. Like I said, reusing parts of your cover letter is fine. Everybody's going to use the same general structure for a lot of your introduction and conclusion paragraphs, but it is really imperative that you do check and make sure that there is no information from another job in that cover letter. If you include information that indicates that you have recycled the cover letter to the employer that you are sending it to, they will most likely throw it away. I know a lot of us can speak from experience. You could be the most qualified candidate, and if they see that you put the wrong firm or the wrong position title, it indicates immediately that you have no attention to detail and they will likely not consider you as a candidate. So that's really important for you guys. So another thing that we like to talk about is not using I at the beginning of every sentence. I know this is comfortable. I know this is easy to start each sentence with I. This cover letter is essentially about you. But just for the simple fact that it sounds a little bit better, it gives a little bit more variety to the reader. Try and start your sentences with things other than I. You can mix in my, and then you can kind of use subordinate clauses to make it so that it's not as monotonous to read. We also like to note that if you guys are working on a judicial cover letter, that is a whole different ball game in a lot of ways, and we really would like you to come in and meet with one of us to discuss that. We have more resources for you. It's a little bit more complex, a little bit more robust, and you definitely need a lot of attention to detail in that setting. So we would love for you to specifically come in, especially for your judicial cover letter, even if you're super comfortable writing cover letters. You've used the instructional cover letter before. We still want you to come in for that. Another important thing is electronically signing your cover letter. As you can see on the screen, you just put /S/ and that indicates that that is signed by you. So you put that little symbol and then your name, and that indicates that it has been signed. When you send your cover letter to your employer, please save it as a PDF. This ensures that when the employer downloads it, the format looks the way that you intended and that it doesn't change the way it looks, go on to 2 pages or anything like that. And that is with the caveat that anytime you email us at any point, please send us things in Word format and nothing else ever. We love to tell you guys that, and I know it's really annoying, but when you're sending things to an employer, please put them in a PDF just so that it flattens the document and nothing can change. And lastly, if a job posting states that a cover letter is optional, we really highly recommend that you do write one. This gives an employer, first of all, it indicates obviously interest and effort on your part, but it also like gives you that chance to set yourself apart from other candidates and really explain why you are a good fit for that job, why you are relevant, like we had talked about earlier, and just to really highlight the reasons why you are their best pick.
So, thank you, Nina. Switching a bit to the instructional cover letter. And so, we find, and I think a lot of people are like myself, actually, like when you don't know what something's supposed to look like, it's very difficult to start writing something. You've got that blank Word document. And yes, I said Word document on purpose. And so to know sort of what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to be. And so having this instructional cover letter is very nice. This is one of our favorite handouts. You can also find this on Simplicity in the online resource library. There are also paper copies in our office. And you can, you reach out to any of us. We hand these out like candy. And so just the normal format and we understand this is the year, 2024. In case we ever reuse this in future years too. You're not writing real letters. When are you mailing anything? And so we understand that this is all a fiction and that you're writing a cover letter and pretending it's a real letter that will go be mailed. And so there's a few pieces of this that just need to be there because that is what is expected by every single employer. And so, like Nina mentioned, you will be using your same resume header at the top. So that will have your name, your contact information, all that good stuff. So you do not need to repeat it back in the body of the letter. And that will be there and it will be sort of that consistency. So if they do end up printing out your materials or anything like that, you will have this nice header that kind of ties all of your materials together. And then this stuff is all sort of your standard letter stuff. And that's something to think about too when you're thinking about spacing. Cover letters should never exceed 1 page. And so when you're thinking about how long your paragraphs are going to be and all of that sort of stuff, you want to make sure that you are saving space for the other formalities. So a date, always need to date it. And you can date it the date of the deadline or a date earlier, the date you actually applied. That's okay. It just needs to have a date on there. Just make sure that the date is in the proper format and is correct. You got the right year and all that sort of stuff. And then there's the address block. And this is sort of something that I know I see a lot of students struggle with and what this is supposed to look like. So you should have the individual's name. And try your best to try to find somebody's name to address the cover letter to. Most job postings will tell you, but if for some reason you find a job posting that does not tell you, I will tell you a few things that you can do in the below in the dear or the salutation line. But try to find somebody's name. You can always also, I think, unless a job posting says do not contact us for whatever reason, contact the firm, contact the employer. It will show a lot of sort of interest and a lot of, I don't want to say courage, but kind of like that you're willing to pick up the phone and call somebody and ask a question. And not everyone does that. So it's always going to be a win in your column if you do call and reach out or email and reach out. And so you want to start with the individual's name. Make sure that you have their correct title, and then the employer name, and then the street address, and city, state, and zip code. Do not put the country on there. So if you are copy and pasting from Simplicity, just because of the system settings, will always include US on there. Do not bring that over to your cover letter. Make sure you delete that part. That should not be there. And then there's what we call a salutation line, or the dear line. So you're always going to want to say dear and then the person's name. And so I kind of want to talk both how you're writing the individual's name in the address block plus the salutation line, because there's some differences here. The individual's name in an address block should never have what we call an honorific, and that is your Mr., Miss, or Mix. And if you know for a fact that they are an attorney, we encourage you to put the Esquire. So that's the ESQ period at the end, because that way you do not anger them. Some attorneys don't care if you forget or don't forget the Esquire piece, but other attorneys really do care, and that's a real mixed bag. And so it's better to just put the Esquire to be on the safer side. So for example, if you were writing a letter to me, a licensed attorney, who was non-practicing, just, you know, if the ethics people are listening, you would write Christopher Grlica, Esquire. However, down in the salutation line, the dear, you would say, Dear Mr. Grlica, no Esquire. When you use the honorific, don't use the Esquire piece. So, and make sure down in that honorific that you are putting just the last name, and try to make sure that you know either to use Mr. if they are male identifying, Miss if they are female identifying, or Mix if they are non-binary, or maybe use they them pronouns. And so sometimes you may not know and you're just guessing, but do your due diligence in that prep work that Jody talked about to figure out who that is. And I do want to note too, you will not see MRS on here, because MRS indicates a marital status, and that is not relevant to professional letters like this. So always use MS. And that's the salutation line. Another key thing that I think I noticed and change a lot on cover letters is we actually do a colon after the last name instead of a comma. I think comma, like, people just kind of naturally go with that one. Now, you're saying, okay, but I don't know who it is. And, you know, there's no name anywhere I've contacted and they've given me nothing. Then we really recommend probably doing like Dear Hiring Committee or Dear Hiring Manager. Both of those are better than To Whom It May Concern. To Whom It May Concern is kind of out of fashion and also just like really reads generic. And remember, as we were talking about so much, you don't want a generic sounding letter. And so starting with that, it's already like you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage with how it sounds. At least Dear Hiring Manager or a Dear Hiring Committee kind of sound like you put some thought into it. There's likely somebody who's hiring. And so that's usually the better one for that one. And so go with that. And as you'll see, as we talked about, as Nina talked about, the first paragraph, that's your introduction, and short and sweet. It can be even shorter than what we have here. And with this handout as well, when you look at it, pay attention to the sizes of these paragraphs. These are relatively the sizes that you want. And, you know, sometimes they can be a little bit more, but these are around, if you're like, you know, writing up your first one, around this. And then obviously come see myself, Nina, or Jody, and we can like make sure that you're containing all the correct information and you have everything. You're not getting too wordy. So after your introduction, then we move into that why them I talked about. You know, why do you want to work with this employer? All of that good stuff, where you're connecting with the employer at a real level. Then you get to talk about yourself for a little bit. And you talk about those experiences, that why you that we talked about. And lastly is your conclusion, which again, like Nina mentioned, should be short, sweet, and to the point. And that's what that should be. And you'll see we have two different sincerelys down here. One is if you're sending it electronically, which is just that electronic signature. And I know some folks really like love to make a real signature or something in like a PDF and then like attach it. And honestly, that sounds like a lot of work that you don't need to do. And just don't. You can do this. I can tell you for a fact that many attorneys in any states or jurisdictions that utilize electronic filing, that is how we sign a pleading. So the attorneys in the law firms will totally know what this is and will understand it, and will not judge you. Now, in the off chance, the real off chance that somehow you are mailing a cover letter. And honestly, I think I can only think of one employer in the that actually still has us do this. You would be actually hand signing your cover letter, so you just need to leave space. If that happens, in that very, very unlikely chance, contact Jody, Nina, and I, and we will make sure that that looks correct and you have enough space and it's all like fancy, because there might be some other things to consider if you're actually mailing it. But at 99.9999 repeated % of the cover letters that you will ever send in your entire life will be electronic. So, but yeah, that is this, pick up this handout, and because it is so nice. But yeah, Jody, Nina, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I wanted to just say that, like I think we've all mentioned, writing a cover letter is not particularly intuitive to anyone, really. And just because you're in law school and do a lot of writing, it doesn't mean it should come naturally to you. So don't feel like when you sit down to write one that you're doing something wrong. Follow the guidelines that we've laid out in this video, and follow the instructional cover letter to the best of your ability. And then, no matter what, anytime you're writing a cover letter, come see one of us, shoot it to us in an email and ask us to review it. Make an appointment to sit down and talk about it. They become easier to write, and you will be able to write it on your own. Learning how to do it from the outset will make writing them down the road a lot easier. So, just like anything else, you want to practice, and then you can go along your merry way and easily do them down the road. So, we encourage you to come see us. Cover letters don't have to be scary. So we hope you have learned a bit here, or at least set you on the road to writing a cover letter that you can be proud of, and that will hopefully yield some interviews and a potential position somewhere. So if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out. You can reach any of us at our emails or make appointments, and we'll be happy to chat with you. Thanks so much for joining us, though. Take care.